Welcome back, friends. Today's video is a first for me, so please don't judge the final result too harshly. After watching Boiler Hobby Time, Gamey Builds and Studson Studio, I decided to try my hand at kit bashing, so after a bit of searching at my local China mall, I came across this dream carriage set. The set caught my eye, and as I have a history with military model building, I immediately felt that these carriages could benefit from some armor upgrades. Because this is the funny dream carriage role-playing series, I decided that a humorous take would be the best approach for this particular kit bash. I really like the fact that this set also demands that you play with your friends. I went for the beauty fashion edition as it's much better quality than the regular carriage sets. Although this is just for child, as the box states, I think I'm in the clear as I don't think I ever really progressed past the age of 16. Jokes aside, I really like the box art on this one, and I always enjoy reading the translated text on these imported items. This one isn't too bad though. Products which involve colors and shapes are a vital ingredient in a child's development, and to develop numerous skills such as motor skills, coordination, problem solving, and visual identification. The simplest function of determining the correct location or name for a color shape rewards the child with fun and a sense of accomplishment. Now that we know all we have to gain from playing with this toy, let's crack this bad boy open. For a toy that only cost 100 Rand, which is roughly $5, I'm actually pretty impressed with the quality of this thing. As a start, I disassembled each wagon. This will allow me to work on each individual part with a bit more ease. My plan is to have the chassis as one project and the bodies as a second project. I really like these shapes, and my first thought was to try and turn one into some sort of tank and the other one into a radar device. After gluing the two halves of the round carriage together and cleaning up the seams, I used some bamboo sticks from my local craft store to make a floor for the vehicle. For the interior, I glued styrene strips in place and then filled the gaps with air dry modeling clay. With the body prepped, I moved on to the turret. I marked a hole for the cannon on half of a ping pong ball, and I'm going to use this threaded tube I found in my toolbox as the base of the cannon. I need to choose materials that will be in proportion to this threaded tube to build up the cannon. The end part of the sleeve anchor will be perfect as a muzzle bell for the end of the cannon. I'm going to use one of these flexible straws to make up the main part of the barrel. And here's what the end product looks like. I used the other half of the ping pong ball to make a base plate for the gun to connect to. It fits inside the turret like this. Next, I needed a platform for the turret to sit on, so I went back to those bamboo sticks I got from the craft store. I cut the bamboo strips down to size and then I lay them out in the shape that I wanted. Then I used some super glue to glue down the support struts to hold everything in place. I glued the platform in place on the roof and I added some small struts at the corners. I wanted a mechanism that would look like it drove the turret, so I used this old motor that I found in my toolbox and I added some cables to the back and glued them into the round body. This cannon is going to need some sort of ammunition holder. I stuck these two water bottle lids together and then added a strip of cardboard to hide the seam. I stuck it to the back of the body and used some bamboo strip for support. At this point I felt like my idea was starting to come to life. The ammo holder needed a way to connect to the gun, so I used this piece of flexible straw to create an ammo feeder to the gun. I love the rhinestone method for rivets used on Studson Studios, so I decided to do something similar with these decorative nail art stickers. I cut out a turret surround on the laser cutter, then stuck the half spheres to it for an industrial effect. I wanted the chassis to look a little more rugged and off-roady, but I still wanted them to have that fairytale vibe to them, so I decided the best way to do this would be to just add some different wheels. I found these wheels that I had left over from a toy monster truck in my bits box. I glued the wheels on with some super glue, and I must say that I was really happy with how they looked. In order for my imaginary fairy tale weapons to become self-propelled, they would need some form of power plant. I glued an old motor to the front of one of the chassis, and I bent a straw in place to look like an exhaust. This was the first point in the build where I started making mistakes with my filming. There were a few times I just didn't hit record on the camera. The motor needed beefing up, so I added some scrap plastic and wires to make it look a little bit more believable. I used part of a toy car's undercarriage, and I used a water bottle cap. At this point I decided that these vehicles needed some operators, so after searching on Thingiverse for a little while, I came across these really awesome space dwarves. I'll add a link to the description below. These space dwarves were exactly what I was looking for. I wanted the drivers of my fictional vehicles to look like Fairytale hired guns. The STLs were absolutely amazing, but my resin printing skills are terrible at this point in time. I messed up one of the figures with poor support, but I did manage to reprint it later on. I then moved on to making a chair for the sitting figure. These baby food lids are awesome for scratch building. I cut out the center and found that the dwarf was a perfect fit. I used some 1.5mm welding rods as control handles as they're easy to bend into place, and I used some styrene sheet to make footrests. I used a milk bottle cap to close off the back of the seat. I used a capacitor, some wire and an air reservoir from a model railway wagon to give some extra detail. Once I had finished the driver, I gave him and his battle machine a coat of grey primer with a spray can. This is my first scratch build, and I really started to get excited when I saw everything coming together at this point in the build. The original doors were letting the side down on aggressiveness, so I needed to bulk them up a little bit and make them look more armoured. I scraped the hearts off the doors, and I attached some skulls that I designed in AutoCAD and I laser cut out of some card. I figured the skulls made for a good hired gun logo, and I also added them to the crest that clips onto the front of the vehicle. Whilst I was designing the skulls, I thought they might look a bit cheesy, but once I stuck everything together, I really liked how it all turned out. I'm really not the best figure painter, so I didn't record this process. I was happy with the overall look of the driver though, and his control module once I'd finished painting it. I find painting figures to be really tough. I rely on washes to make the process a little easier for myself, and I always like a weathered and faded look on a figure. The chassis got a coat of matte black spray paint, and then I gave it a good dry brushing with some white acrylic paint. I weathered the exhaust with some Vallejo pigment powders, and I added some colour to the power plant to add some interest. The body of this war machine needed to look like it had seen some action, so I used an olive drab wash to colour the entire body. I applied a milky wash and then added water to the areas where I wanted to thin it out. I painted the ammo feeder tube dark blue, and that was just to add some colour to the build. The finished doors got the same treatment as the rest of the body. I like to apply a heavy wash, then soak up the excess in the spots where it isn't needed with a bit of tissue paper. You'll see me do this on all my builds. The gold trim on the original toy looked really cool, so I decided to add it again with some Vallejo brass acrylic paint. I wanted the skulls to really pop out, so I gave them a coat of red acrylic paint, and I feel that it worked really well with the brass. The original plan was to only build one vehicle for this video, but a buddy of mine convinced me to do the two vehicles as a set. Thanks Aaron, this was awesome advice. You can see here that I used the exact same process for the second chassis as I did for the first one. The original vehicle didn't have an access door, so I used my motor tool with a cutting disc to cut one out. A water bottle cap was added to the roof ornament to serve as a platform for the radar dish. The power plant is a little different from the first one, as I needed to accommodate the different shape of the body of this vehicle. This plumber's tape lid made the perfect size radar dish when I cut it in half. I added some wire mesh 1.5mm welding rod, and an electrical cap to get the end result. One of the wheels from the original toy made for an excellent base to connect the radar to. As I mentioned before, I didn't hit record for this part, so we need to jump ahead a bit. I used some styrene sheet to build up the armored windows, and I felt that this vehicle needed some firepower to protect itself, so I added some lollipop sticks to each door for cannons. The doors got the same skull treatment as the previous vehicle, and I used some capacitors to add some electronic equipment detail around the vehicle. The adhesive beads were used again to give a rivet detail on the doors to make them look a little more robust. This vehicle needed some headlights, so I cut up some railway signal lights and connected them to the body with rigid wire. The glue that I used did not stick well to these types of plastics that I was working with. I'll definitely try to avoid this in future, but for now I've got a whole bunch of glue blobs all over the build. I've always respected any type of model builder, but the builders on YouTube that do these scratch builds are absolutely next level. It gave me an entirely new respect for how difficult this skill is, and it's really difficult to make stuff look good. Just like the body of the first vehicle, the body of this one got a great primer with a can of spray paint. It's really tough to keep these videos short enough to keep people from getting bored when they watch them, so I didn't record the painting of this vehicle as it was exactly the same as the first one. I added the same gold trim to add a royal look, and I colored all the detailed parts to give it character. Although these machines are weapons of war, they still need to fit into a fairy tale world. Many of the people that I showed these vehicles to thought they looked very steampunk. I really wasn't going for that look at all, but if people are happy with them and they look good, then I'm happy. I needed to build up a display base, so I built one out of some layers of polystyrene. I've covered the rough method for these bases in my other videos, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. Having a full-time job and 2 little kids makes it extremely difficult to get these videos done. So when it comes to stuff like this, I find that it's best to just cover it in another video. Because this is a fairy tale world, it definitely needs some colorful mushrooms, and it gives me a chance to use some of the paints that I wouldn't usually use on a regular build. I sculpted the mushrooms out of some air dry clay, and I put them in the oven to speed up the drying time. I used some colorful acrylic washes to paint the mushrooms. I superglued the vehicles to the base, and I also added the standing figure up on the hillside. I added some details to the base off camera. And after a lot of hard work and effort, let's take a look at how the final model turned out. As I mentioned previously in the video, this is my first kit bash, and I must say it was way more fun than what I thought it was going to be. I enjoy model building. I've done it for a very long time. I'm not the best at it, but I would definitely say that this totally got me to explore different parts of my creativity. I highly recommend trying this method of building. There are a lot of parts of this build that didn't go the way that I planned, and a lot of things that I would change if I had to do it again, but nothing's really that serious. And as I get older, I'm way less harsh on myself about model building. I just want to enjoy myself for that time that I work on these kits. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. It really does help me to see if people are watching my videos and if I should continue making content. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy model building.